Hi and welcome to AXSChat. We're delighted to have Sabine Lobnig from the Mobile and Wireless Forum with us today. She also goes under the Twitter handle of @GaryUpdates. This is really exciting for me. I've been working in mobile for a long time, and I've been aware of the work of Gary Updates when they were part of the Mobile Manufacturers Forum, which they've just recently changed to expand the scope. So I think it's really important. It's an initiative which Sabine's going to explain, that maps out the accessibility features on mobile and other devices. So it's a really useful resource for people. It's one that I think that needs to get more because it's something that really I think would be helpful for end users and also for people that are planning accessibility when they're looking for devices. So Sabine, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. We're very pleased to have you with us. Can you tell us a bit how this got started?
Hello, and many thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to be part of the AXSChat. So you already mentioned that we slightly changed our name, so we're now the Mobile and Wireless Forum, as in contrast to the Mobile Manufacturers Forum, which we ceased to be 2 weeks ago. And we are, in essence, we are an international association of companies with an interest in mobile and wireless communications. And we changed our name just to reflect changes in the industry, and in particular also the upcoming evolution to 5G and the Internet of Things. We are active in different areas, one of which, and one that is growing in importance for us, is accessibility. And in particular, how to make devices better accessible to persons with disabilities, and also to spread the information on all the accessibility features that are already available, but that people don't usually know about for today's devices. So you already mentioned that we have a project that is called GARY, and GARY is the short name for Global Accessibility Reporting Initiative. It's a mouthful, so that's why we stick with the short name of GARY database. And that, in its essence, is an online database that gives you information on the accessibility features in mainstream devices. We started out at around 2008-2010 with listing accessibility information for mobile phones. And that grew considerably from a few devices in the first years to now over 1,100 models that are available worldwide. And what you find in the database is 110 accessibility features and the devices listed against these accessibility features. So for example, if you're a blind person and you're looking for a device that is accessible to you by having a screen reader, for example, you can go to the database, and the database will list all the devices that have a screen reader. Or if you're a deaf person, but you're not quite sure what kind of accessibility features might be in devices that can help you, you can just say, okay, I'm looking for a device that has specific features for deaf persons. And the database will give you, again, a list of devices that fulfill these criteria, and will also give you a detailed list of accessibility features that can help you in this area, with a short explanation of what these accessibility features mean and contain. So that's how we started out with mobile phones only. We had a first expansion in 2013 where we started to include also accessibility features for tablets. And we started listing accessibility related apps. So those are apps specifically designed to overcome a barrier or to help people with disabilities. And just 2 months ago, not even 1 month ago, on the 3rd of December 2016, we further expanded our database to now also list accessibility information on smart TVs and on wearables. So the database is really an evolving project with more and more information. more and more product groups, but then also in regards to the accessibility features themselves, they are also evolving, because the list that we had in 2008 is not the same list anymore today. It is submitted to a stakeholder and feature review every 2 years, where we invite, in particular, people from the disability community, but also all other stakeholders like regulators, accessibility experts, industry experts, to come and tell us if the accessibility features are still relevant, if they're understandable, or if there are accessibility features missing that people would like to see in the devices or like to see in the database. So it's an evolving project in every sense and in every aspect. And well, it's ongoing, always work in progress.
Thank you so much for that update, Sabine. I was reading today that one of the main manufacturers of home appliances and technology, tablets and mobiles, LG, is planning to build devices in from 2017 with Wi-Fi. So home appliances, Wi-Fi, all those devices are going to have a display, are going to be are going to be part of the home, and we know how important that those devices for people with disabilities, and how can they improve their lives. So is in your plans to expand the database to bring all this systems that are basically part of our lives, because basically they can be very helpful, especially in the area of accessibility?
Yes, so we do not have a concrete timeline on any further expansion, as we just expanded and trying to really build and integrate and stabilize these aspects. But you're very right, the whole ecosystem, it's all interconnected, and it's very difficult to divide the product groups as we did in the past. For one, the mobile phone very much becomes the hub to control all the other devices, for example. But then you're very right, connected home appliances, there has already been some interest. We have been approached and asked several times by different stakeholders if we could and would expand the GARI database in this area as well. And in principle, yes, we could definitely do. The GARI concept is quite flexible. So all it needs basically is that you have a certain number of companies that are committed to sit together with all the other stakeholders, so the disability community, the experts, and so on, and to establish a minimum list of accessibility criteria. And then to find this list of criteria, and then also to have a minimum set of devices to start with. Because starting a new section in a database, you do need a certain number of devices to have a good start and to create momentum. But okay, that was a very long answer to your short question. The short answer would be yes, no problem. We could expand to household appliances as well.
We don't mind detailed answers. Okay. I think that I'm particularly interested in the potentiality of the database, because from my point of view, I've been aware of some other projects that have been ongoing for a fair amount of time as well. Things like the GPII. I don't know whether you're familiar with GPII, yes, but essentially GPII wants to, it stands for Global Public Inclusive Infrastructure, wants to be a mesh where it looks up the capabilities of which like GARI has in the database, and understands what device someone has and the compatibility between devices, people, and services. Is that something that do you have a way for service providers and people that are creating these kind of services? Now, the company that Antonio and I work for, one of our sidelines is we create terminals. So we create terminals for ticketing systems and stations and so on, and hotels and so on. And quite often people would like to be able to use the accessibility features on their talk to the terminal rather than use the terminal, or to be able to come up and use NFC, and for terminals to then adapt. So I'm really interested in the whole sort of concept of using what you've got about the features to be able to create that activity and greater accessibility in general. I think it's useful having the database as it is, so you can go and choose a product, but up is actually using that information to automatically enable the features.
To automate, you mean by automatically enable the features when you buy the device?
Well, maybe, but or to if you're using the device with another service, like a web service or whatever, and you've got them on, it knows you're using an LG model phone, and it has these features, and it knows what to look for, and can actually work an interoperability mode with the accessibility features better.
Right. So, okay, I think those are already very, very advanced objectives, I think. With the Gary database, we're kind of tackling the first problem.
I agree.
Which is getting the information about the accessibility features there. And I have full respect for projects like the GPII, which I think is an amazing project, but it's so far out there that it's very difficult to build. So with that, we just did, okay, we had one problem identified, and then we just tackled it and build the database. And based on this step-by-step approach, we expand the database. Because the fact today is, this is a fantastic idea to make it all work together. But the fact today is that we have many, many people who have not even any idea about the accessibility features, the basic accessibility features that exist in today's devices. So the majority of consumers, when you ask them, not important if it's an older person, a blind person, or a deaf person, most will tell you, well, there is no mobile phone for me. I cannot use that technology because I'm older, or I don't see so well, or I don't hear so well. So yes, we have a few tech-savvy people that use technology in an amazing way, but 90% of consumers have no idea. And they really do need the basic accessibility features. So I think the main idea of the Gary database is really to enable the mainstream consumer, or to enable the consumer, people with disabilities, their carers, their families, with giving them the basic information about accessibility in the devices. Everything else comes after that. And I think this information, this access to information, this education of the consumer, that is tremendously important. Because right now, in particular for mobile phones, usually what you do, you go to your mobile phone store, no matter the network provider. You go there and you say, well, I'm not seeing so well, what kind of device do you have for me? And the standard answer, well, we don't have any device for that.
Yeah. So that leads me on to which was the follow-up question. I totally get the complexity of what I was asking, and I was asking for everything on a plate. But essentially, right, so two questions. One is the Gary database open data? So in theory, if someone else wanted to go off and do that really complex work, could they query your data?
Well, for the mobile phones, for example, you can access the data in as an XML feed. So you can subscribe to the data. And actually, many network providers and also national regulators do that, actually. One of the most beautiful implementation, the recent one, has been done by the Mexican regulator. They have created a whole new page on mobile accessibility, where they input the data from the Gary database, customized so that you only have the information for models available in the Mexican market displayed. And they use that to promote mobile accessibility on a national level. So yes, in that term, it's open data. You can subscribe to the data feed.
I think it will be, today when we buy some products, we have information about how much energy they spend, A, B, C. I think it will be extremely interesting to have a similar label for accessibility, probably not in all devices, but in some type of devices. I think that will be something very interesting, just as a side note.
Well, in terms of labels, the thoughts have been, several people have had the thoughts. The problem though is, what do you do with the label? Because you cannot say the device is accessible, yes or no. Because depending on whether you're an older user or a blind user or a person with cognitive impairment, what accessible means is very different. So that's why the label thing is a very problematic one. The only way that we see to go is really that you have a central source of information where you can, where you know there is a place I can go and look up the accessibility features.
So that led on to the second part of the question, which was much more pragmatic, and that was going back to where store, and they approach the straight out of school shop assistant that is going to sell them their contract and say, well, what accessibility feature? Is there any way that you can work with the the stores that are selling these phones to make sure that the Gary info gets to the stores, and that the maybe as part of staff training, they don't get trained in the accessibility features of every phone, but they get trained to know enough that actually if someone asks a question about accessibility, I can go to Gary and find out the answer.
Actually, yes, we do work with the network providers. So very interesting that you mentioned the staff training. It's Vodafone Qatar that is for years now using the Gary database to really do their internal training and have all their staff aware where they can go to look up accessibility. We also work with, with Vodafone in Spain, with the French network operators who use Gary basically to select their portfolio of devices for the different user groups. So we have, the network providers have different ways of using Gary. Sometimes it's very surprising how they use Gary, but they do use it. And it's a free tool for them, and we do advocate to them that they should use it. So whether they decide to just have the database online available in every store, I mean, everyone has internet access, you just go to the browser and look it up, or whether you want to integrate the database or the information on the accessibility of mobile phones in their own website, like Telstra in Australia, for example, does. They subscribe to the data feed and pull that into their own website. It doesn't really matter. It's a free tool for them to use, and we do very actively encourage them to use it. But then, of course, you have so many network providers in the world and so very many shops. We have not managed to catch them all, but we're working on it.
And of course there are third parties that resell phones. You know, I can go to my local supermarket and they've got a section where they're selling mobile phones as well.
Yes.
But it's more important with the mobile phone than it is even with a computer to understand, because most of the world accesses the internet and products and services via a mobile and not via a PC. So it's something I'm passionate about there, and I'm just trying to think of the ways that we can spread the message, because you've got a wealth of information into the hands of the consumer, and
I mean, the way that we mainly go for the moment is that we really try to work with the umbrella organizations of persons with disabilities, because they do have direct access to a lot of directly affected people. But of course, not every person with a disability either wants to identify as being one or is a member of an organization. So this really is the first top-down approach. Another one is certainly to work with, to work with consumer organizations as general, and then to just spread the word, be wherever we can to meet with the right people and to just let them know that there are really good devices for them.
Something that we have observed over the last 2 years on AXSChat is that almost every country is at a different level of digital. So the accessibility organizations around the world, they are at different stages of understanding digital, and that also impacts the way how they serve the population of the country that they are in.
Yes.
And some people, they end up, today they have access to the internet, they end up doing their own research because some of the organizations that work with them are not yet at the digital level that they feel they need their needs. So what I would like to ask is, when you, in your database, where do you see people from around the world searching? So where are the most common searches coming from?
So sorry. Right now, the search statistics show us that database is mainly used in Europe and North America. So I would say 30% Europe, 40% North America. The rest of the resting 30% are pretty equally distributed over Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Australia. And of course, you see, sorry. You see where national regulators get involved and push the topic. You will see that there is a lot more interest generated, of course. So again, I would like to mention the example of Mexico, where the government got very interested in promoting accessibility, and that of course pushed the national awareness of the topic. But then we also have countries like South Africa, where one of the network providers is very interested and very engaged in disability and accessibility, and they integrated Gary and pushed the information about accessible devices. So, I'm sorry. So depending on the national level of interest, there are certainly different levels of awareness. I'm really sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Everyone seems to have a cold at the moment, and I've been looking at the Mexican site. It's pretty good, actually.
Yes,
Yeah,
and it's in Spanish
you can drill down quite quickly and find stuff. It's pretty nicely done. I'll let you quietly die in the corner while I try and distract the audience.
Well, I think one very important point also when we talk about accessibility and getting the information out there is certainly it doesn't suffice to provide it in English. I mean, for you and me, of course, we feel very comfortable in English, and our generation is used to accessing information in English. But then there are other countries with different education levels, and then we talk about the senior population and maybe a lot of people with disabilities that didn't have access to that much education. So it is important to provide the information in their national languages, which of course is a humongous task. And we only scrap the surface, but we do offer Gary in currently 16 languages, very soon 17. And they are quite spread about the spectrum. So it's not only European or Western languages. We do have also Japanese, Chinese, Arabic. So I think that is an additional point that really is very important when getting the information out there.
You also have sign language description.
Well, yes, to a limited extent, yes. So we have in American Sign Language description how you can use the database and how you find the information. Unfortunately, we don't have the full database translated into sign language.
No, that'd be quite a challenge.
Oh yeah, it would be a fun project, but
yeah,
time-consuming.
someone will be signing until they retire. And of course, the other thing that you've got is the fact that technology doesn't stand still. So your database has to be a living, and you've got all of these products that may have had accessibility features that are being discontinued. How often do you refresh the data?
So we have a guiding principle that our devices are only displayed for 2 years, unless the manufacturer really goes back into the database and specifically says it should be displayed longer. That is because many of the devices are not available or not made available longer than 2 years. It's just that mobile phones have a very short timeline or how do you
shelf
say?
life? Yes.
Yes, shelf life. Thank you. Of course, it will be different for the other sections, like the smart TVs. I mean, I would hope that they have a longer shelf life. But yeah, so usually they are displayed for 2 years. Of course, we do have people then saying, well, in particular in low-income disability communities, you often have second-hand devices, or you would need the accessibility information on older devices. That is true to a certain extent, but then today we talk about devices that get over-the-air updates. So even if the hardware is an older device, very often it does get a software update. And that's probably also very interesting to know about the accessibility features. We do have hardware and software accessibility features listed. So it does cover both aspects.
Yeah, because that quite often changes quite significantly when you get an over-the-air update.
Oh yes, and very often you wish you could revert back to the older version.
Yeah, oh, I've had that a few times. A certain fruity manufacturer won't allow you to do that. Certainly update with caution. I never automatically update anymore. I always read the what's changed bit. But I think that we'll do hands down phones. So maybe and certainly in developing economies, but also actually within families. So what you find is that actually that constituent of people that you talked about as not considering themselves as disabled, not particularly comfortable going to or to buy a new phone, they're the most likely to get a second-hand smartphone because their son or daughter has decided to take the upgrade with their contract, or is fed up with the iPhone 6 and it must have an iPhone 7. So I can see why you would want to stuff off the database, because you need to keep it current, but equally some people, to be able to access that information, it's like, oh, my son's given me this iPhone 4S, what can I do with it, or some kind of way of you can't buy them, but I've got 3 of them floating around the house.
Very familiar feeling. No, very true. No, but the truth is we do need to keep the database in some sort of dimension, otherwise it would be getting too much. But the information is not lost. So if really you want to look up an old device, you can always contact us and we will do our best to retrieve the information. So nothing of this information gets lost. It certainly is kept. But coming back to the statistics that you were asking me about, we do have statistics employed in our backend that not only allow us to look at who is coming to the database, but it also allows us to see what they're actually looking for. And I think that's quite interesting, because if you go to the search statistics in the Gary database, you will see that hearing features are by far winning out. So most people that come to the database will look for a phone that has hearing aid compatibility, improved call quality, or any sort of feature that helps you when you're either hard of hearing, but mostly hard of hearing or already deaf. That's quite interesting as well. It is closely followed then by features for the blind. There is a certain gap then to features for people with reduced mobility. And then the one that is not searched for so much right now is devices for persons with cognitive impairment.
Okay, I'm really interested by this breakdown, because quite often the first set of impairments that gets catered for is visual impairments. So the fact that you're saying that it's hearing that creates the greatest number of is of interest,
Yeah.
because it suggests that maybe the manufacturers need to be putting a bit more of a focus on that. And I think that goes across assistive technologies in general. Accessibility efforts tend to focus on visual impairments and mobility impairments more so than auditory or cognitive. And I think that the cognitive one, I'm not entirely surprised that the inquiries are less, because firstly, people don't really to frame cognitive impairments.
Yes.
I'm dyslexic or I'm autistic. I don't associate that necessarily with being cognitively impaired, so I wouldn't be searching for that. So that might be an element of it, and again, awareness that there is even any kind of accessibility features, so they may not even know that there's anything that they can go out and search for.
Very true. So I think something that we would certainly also like to do is promote a little bit more the accessibility features as such. So not just saying, well, there are accessible devices, come to the database and look at it, but actually put out there is a function that is no screen timeout, meaning the device gives you as much time as you need to reply to a request or whatever. These little features that are super helpful, in particular to people that don't particularly identify with this sort of impairment, or something like simple access that allows you to have a very easy interface and use the device and not say, well, that's much too complicated for me. No, not at all. It can be simplified to be adapted to a user profile. So again, raising awareness and empowering people to really choose a device that can help in their particular situation. I think that's that's basically our mission and the one goal that we would really like to move toward to.
I mean, that sounds fantastic, and I'm very interested around cognitive. I'm dyslexic, and I contribute to the W3C's Cognitive Accessibility Task Force. And so when you mentioned about no timeouts, that's one of our bête noires. The stuff just forcing you to do stuff within a couple of minutes. So absolutely love to know which phones support that, and also the other bit of the puzzle is, do you give instructions? And I haven't looked, so I haven't done my homework enough, mea culpa. When you list the features, do you give a link through to instructions on how to activate them and stuff like that within the database, or do you have to go to the manufacturer's website?
No, we don't have a direct link. So if you look in the database, you get your search results. You only have the list of features in the device. But we do have a resource page, which we try to keep up to date, and where we link, first of all, yes, also to all the manufacturers' accessibility pages, which are quite good in some cases and give you a lot of information. They also sometimes give you information about features that are not even listed in Gary, so very new features or additional features, so certainly a good resource. But then we also link to recent YouTube videos, for example, where users themselves describe, well, the latest OS update has these and these features, that's the best way to activate and use them. Because this peer-to-peer review is unbeatable. It's the best resource there is. So we try to have one resource page where you can have a short overview of the best tips.
Fantastic. We've reached the end of our half hour. So thank you very much. It's been fascinating. And I'm really looking forward to you joining us on Twitter.
Oh yes, I'm looking forward to the questions. I'm very curious what will come up.
Okay. Thank you, Sabine.
Thank you so much, Antonio and Neil.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.